Yeah, in the previous session, we look at understanding what data types are. We look at strings, we look at what numbers are, and under numbers, we had integers and float or double, right? And then we had a third data type, which was Boolean data type. Yeah, so we had to look at some few examples, and we told you that that's how Python recognizes them. In this session, we are going to use Python itself, right? Run a script and see how it actually print out or it actually recognize these data types that we referred to in the previous session. So we see that before the previous session, we talked about the print function. So the print function is just a function, right? In Python that allows you to bring out or expose or show anything that you want on the console, or on the terminal, right? So we are going to mostly use that in order to run whatever we have to see how Python recognizes these data types. So let's get into that and see how that's done. So in the previous session, we talk about the data types. And so we say we are going to use print function to see how they are. But the first one, we are going to test strings. So my first example, right, I'm going to use strings, right? So I'll comment this side. So we need to talk about strings first. And then we say strings, we need to print. And then we say strings are anything that we put inside what? Quotation mark. So we do the print function. And I'm going to have, so this is the print function. This is how it works. Now, within the parentheses, whatever you want to print out will be put into the parentheses. So there's print and then there's bracket. In that bracket, whatever you want Python to expose or whatever you want Python to print out for you in the terminal, you put it within that bracket, right? So here we want to put a string, and a string must be in what? Inside a quotation mark. So let's do that. You have that in a quotation mark. So I'll open my quotation mark. I'm using single. You can use double quotes. It doesn't matter. I will talk about the difference later when we are delving deep into that. So with a single quotation mark. So now I'll say this is an example of a string. So I have this an example of a string as something that I just want Python to print out for me. So Python is going to print that for us. So let's run that. So if you run this code, click on the run button. So if you run that, you'll be able to see this thing exposed. Yes. So this is an example of a string is written here, right? You can see that it's written. It's an example of a string. That's what comes out exposed, like come out on our terminal. But that's what we give to Python, right? I will kill this terminal, kill this, and then give another one. So I'll write another example. I'll do another print again. If you don't put print, we are not going to see it on the terminal. So the print just allow you to do that. So here I'll do double quote. This is a string in a double quote, quotation marks, yes, quotation marks. So now we are going to run it again. So when I run this, you'll see that the first print at the top right here, the first print here comes. This Python is printing this one first. So meaning what we have within this print is here, then there will be this second one that will follow up. So that's the first message, that's the first print, and the second print also brings out this. This is a string in the double quotation marks. Okay. Now, we now need to actually see. We are just exposing what we are giving to Python, but we want to see how Python actually recognizes these data types, right? Okay. Python needs to know the type of data that we give to it. If Python has to understand that type, right, or recognize that type, Python has a particular command or function that is called type. Type is used to see the type of a particular data, any particular data or any particular item that you want to write there. So if you want to know the type, right, we have an inbuilt function for Python in Python that allow you to see what type of object or what type of data that you are feeding the script. So we say we are going to talk about so I'm going to a bit talk about the type function. So the type function also comes in this way. I'm going to use, so you write it like this. So it's type, and it also has a bracket in front of it. anytime we are using a function, right? Function comes in a name and bracket, name and bracket. Don't worry, we'll talk about functions well. So now, whenever there's a name, a type, and a bracket, meaning type bracket is a function in Python. Okay. So now, whatever you want to do here, right? Whatever you want to do will be within the bracket. So when we want to find the type of something, so we say the data goes here. So you have to write it in this format, the type into bracket data. But do you know that when we just use type like that, nothing will come. Let's not comment it. Let's comment it out. Let's remove the comment, right? If you remove the comment, remember we did commenting, meaning that when you do comment, Python will not recognize that. So I'm going to use an example of, so I will say string in type function. So now I'm going to run this, right? And I run this, what do we have? So we have only two things coming out. So this is a string is the first one. And then in the second one, right, we have this is a string in a double quotation mark. Those are the only two that show. But the third one is not showing on the terminal. Why? Because we didn't use the print function on that. So if anytime you want to see something on the terminal, remember to always use the print. Print is the one that will bring it out. So you have to print it as the name says. So we are saying type string in type function does not, we will not expose it. This function is not to display the thing on the console for us. But then each function is there to find the type. But then for us to actually see that, we need to put all that within the print function. So I'm going to the type, right? Going to do print now. Put everything within this bracket. You see that the print has its own bracket, and the type that you are using in the print also fully is embedded within the print bracket, because everything that needs to be shown, right, the print has to encapsulate everything that you want to show, and everything I want to show in this case type a particular something. So we want to find the type, right? So inside the print we are putting another function that's type, and that type is taking a data that is a function. So there's a type within the print function, and then the type itself, right, is trying to find the type is working on this particular data that we fed it over here, right? This is a string. So now let's run this now. Now there are three prints. So we are expecting to get three results, right? In the terminal. So let's see. Let's run that. Great. Great. So here we have three results because now we have used three prints, and print is now be able to expose the type for us. Now, if you look at the first one, the first two are always there, but the third one, what we are seeing now, we are seeing class str. Class str. So that's how Python, this one, the type function is to allow Python to recognize what we are using. So the type of the data that we have put inside the type is str. Str is just string. So str for string. That's what Python recognizes. So yeah, that's how we said we can use print to see how Python will recognize a particular data. Now let's change the data to other ones, right? What the next one we talk about? We talk about numbers, right? And the numbers, the first one we talk about integers. So I'm going to enter an integer. So I'll leave the first two out. So I'll print the first two because they were just printing. So I'll clean that one. So right now we are no more talking about strings, but we are going to talk about numbers. Numbers. Let me talk about numbers. So yeah, so now in numbers, right, we don't want the thing to be in quotation mark. But before that, let me remove this, right, and put within the quotation mark, let me put a number there, 345 inside the quotation mark. Let's see how Python will recognize it. Let me run it. When I run it, you see that Python say it is still str. Python is still recognized as a string because what you have, the data that you have, is within a quotation mark. So whether it's number, whatever it is, whenever you put it in a quotation mark, Python will always recognize it as a string. Okay, now let's remove the quotation mark and see how Python recognizes this particular number. So I'm now removing it. I remove it. So the type of this particular data, that's what we are using. And then we are using the print to just display it in the terminal. So Let me run it and see what class will come. You see, there's class int, it's an integer. So the class int is what we have. Because it's an integer because it's a counting number and it doesn't basically doesn't have decimal number. That's the understanding we need to have currently. Currently, that's what we need to have. That it doesn't have decimal number. It's just any like just a counting number 345. So the type of data that you have then is what? It's an integer. Okay. So the type of 345 is an integer. So now let me do 345.0. Let me introduce a decimal point and see if that will change to something that we talk about. Yeah, so it changes to float. So it now changes to a floating point number. This is a floating point number now. It's no more an integer because now we have a decimal point, right? So now the type of data types, right, for this particular one is a float because there's now a decimal point. If it's not having a decimal point, then any number like 2.0, right? If I run the 2.0, what's the type of data I will have? I will still have float. But then let me remove the point zero and just do the print of type number 2. We now have an integer, right? That's the basic difference. So this is just the type is allowing you to see how Python will recognize something in its memory. Right? Now let's forget that. Now let's talk about the last data type, right? Which is a boolean. So we said the boolean, there are only two values, true or false, right? So we need just true and then false. Look at how I write my true. The true always starts with, it doesn't have to be in quotation mark because if it is quotation mark, it's going to be a string. So it should start with capital T, right? And write true. So you run this. Let's run this. We have type boolean logic, right? Boolean, true or false. Let me run the another one. Um, let me run the false. Let me run the false. So if you run the false, it's also a bool, true or false, right? Um, then those are the data types that we've spoken about. Now I want to try something. What if I put the true within a quotation mark? What do you think it will be? What will come? It's a str, meaning it's a string as well. You see that? So it means that Python, right? Python will recognize anything as a string whenever I put it quotation mark. Whether the thing is a bool or whatever the data type is, whenever you put it with a quotation mark, it changes automatically to string. Right? That's how you communicate with the programming language. Okay. Now I want to remove the quotation mark, right? And write anything, any other thing. This is my name. Already there's an expression. This is my name. Let me go and run it and see if we see something. Error, 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 error. Because it's not even within a quotation mark for Python to see it as a string. It is not even a number or it's not a bool value. So anything aside that, right? Python is going to have issue with it, right? Yes. So on the basic ground, so in most of our things, we'll be feeding these three data types into the system when writing our Python code, whenever we are going to program. So now that we understand the Python, the data type, we are going to see the different ways of better handling this data and manipulating it within our script.